Okay, we are tight on time, everyone. We are gonna begin. I'd like to get through the rest of the report. We have a very large number of people who want to speak, and I would like to allow everybody their due time. So let's get through items 6 through 9 and provide the board an opportunity to weigh in. So Amy, I turn it back over to you.
Certainly. So when last we left off, we had finished Chapter 5, as I recall, so we're starting with Chapter 6, in particular, Recommendation 6.1. On the whole, Chapter 6 is designed to speak to the issue of professional development, mainly that we don't seem to have that much of it anymore. And without a more robust professional development system, there really is not a good way for us to create and sustain any kind of systemic change in our community college system. Recommendation 6.1, create a continuum of professional development opportunities. This recommendation is designed to talk about the use of flex days, whereby, would you like me to continue? Okay. Whereby colleges receive apportionment dollars and use those dollars for professional development. In its old version, the recommendation would have required that flex days be linked to statewide professional development priorities. The vision was that the Board of Governors, well, I guess that's you all, would have said pretty much on an annual basis, you know, here are the several issues that we think professional development should be structured around in a given year, and then colleges would use their flex day dollars to align their professional development activities with those priorities. We heard back from a variety of parties, in particular the Academic Senate, who is very concerned about our use of the term require and mandate. Many of those flex day activities are locally bargained. So we have removed the requirement language and instead focus our language on recommending and encouraging that those days be aligned with statewide priorities. Recommendation 6.2 essentially says that we need to start directing more of our professional development resources towards improving basic skills instruction and support services. In both of these cases, we place an emphasis on part-time faculty, which are difficult to get to in the professional development realm, and Recommendation 6.2 really says that basic skills instruction and the needs of basic skills students need to be a high priority for professional development, not just for faculty, but also for staff. Chapter 7 talks about statewide leadership and coordination amongst colleges. 7.1, one of the things that we found as we worked our way through the recommendations in the other chapters was that without some kind of more robust and a stronger chancellor's office with a bit more authority, it was going to be difficult for the system to implement many of the recommendations in chapters 1 through 6. As you all are acutely aware, the chancellor's office does not have a great deal of statutory authority, nor do they have the financial resources necessary to administer many of the programs that they already have on their plate. So Chapter 7 and Recommendation 7.1 in specifically talks about developing and supporting a stronger system-wide chancellor's office. Recommendation 7.2.
Amy,
I apologize.
Member Hawkins.
Thank you. On page 61, 7.1, that third bullet, could you give me some idea of what the task force was referring to when it was talking about the Prop 98 funding?
So this is a bullet that had come out of originally our July retreat. one of the big issues surrounding the chancellor's office has to do with its financing system, in particular that it's financed with general fund, non-Prop 98 dollars, and competes for those dollars with statewide programs such as Medi-Cal, TANF, CalWORKS, any kind of health and human services programs, UCN, CSU, and the like. The vision under this was to figure out if there was a way, and the task force is not convinced that there is a way. Let me begin by saying that. To use some Prop 98 funding to support the ongoing operations of the chancellor's office. And there are certainly a lot of legal questions and ramifications related to that, but at present they were interested in having that recommendation at least examined further.
Amy, just a question, maybe Eric, to the recommendations for implementation on 7.1, dealing with giving more authority to the chancellor's office. That is entirely based in statute, correct, as opposed to any regulation that we could adopt?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Proceed.
Continue. Recommendation 7.2 would ask the chancellor's office, districts, and colleges to participate in a common goal-setting process for student success and to report their progress towards meeting these goals to the public. One of the things that struck me, and I'm probably not speaking on behalf of the task force when I say this, is that at no point, either statutorily or in our budget process, do we require districts to set goals. Granted, it's part of the accreditation process in many instances, but the intent is that the state set goals for community colleges generally, and that districts and colleges set their own goals and monitor progress towards meeting those goals as it pertains to the success of their students. This is part of recommendation 7.3, which then would implement a local student success scorecard. So those of you that are familiar with the K-12 API index, we're not proposing whittling this down to some single number, but really developing sort of a one-pager, and we're working on mocking something up as we speak, but a one-pager, perhaps two sides, that pulls out sort of the key metrics of student success, including some of those progression points or momentum points as they're better known, so that colleges have a way of particularly for locally elected trustees, to interact with their own data, to spur conversations amongst themselves and with their communities about how they are doing as a college and what they can do to improve. We're not proposing that we're not asking colleges to compare themselves with other colleges unless they would like to. But if you have a sort of a common scorecard format, and you have other colleges using it, there's certainly nothing to prohibit one college from getting, another college's scorecard and taking a look and making those comparisons themselves. But we're asking them to compare against themselves. I think personally, we all know the power of setting goals and measuring our progress towards them, and that's what that recommendation is designed to accomplish. Recommendation 7.4 is a long-standing one in the higher ed and K-12 arenas, which is for the state of California to develop and support a longitudinal student record system. That's essentially a K-20 student record system. Yes, I hear some snickers in the room and some looks. This has clearly been on education's list of to-dos for quite some time. I somewhat jokingly say that I know more about the dog I recently adopted than most of you know about your incoming students. But we recognize the political climate surrounding student data at this point, and we remain hopeful that this is a recommendation that could get implemented. Chapter 8.
Before you go there, I want to ask Chancellor Scott to say
Oh, I'm
something.
sorry.
I wanted to add something on the student success scorecard, and Amy did a very good job of saying like momentum points, how many students complete 15 units, 30 units, how many certificates and so forth. But we're also, in that scorecard, there will be some breakout of ethnicity so that we can look at the whole issue of achievement gaps. We recognize that there are achievement gaps, and if we are, say, succeeding as a, we'll say as a student body, but some way or another, a certain ethnic group, particularly underrepresented minorities, Latino and African Americans, are not achieving, then we need to address that. And so the scorecard will not only have a general scorecard, but we'll have a breakout in terms of ethnicity.
Yeah, I apologize that of all people, I should have included this because it was such a crucial discussion for the task force, in particular regarding equity issues and measuring equity and disaggregating that data by race and ethnicity. And this is one of the places where that conversation manifests itself. Chapter 8, I apologize, I keep moving on. Were there other questions? No? Chapter 8, align resources with student success recommendations. 8.1 originally read consolidate categorical programs. Clearly it doesn't say that anymore. But one of the conversations the task force had at its last meeting was even though categorical consolidation did not remain a recommendation, it did have a conversation about sort of the siloed effects of some of these programs and the inability for students to sort of move between programs in an easy manner. Many students get associated with a particular program. They become an EOPS student or a CalWORK student, and rather than a student who's just generally getting services. And so the ability to break down those silos programmatically on campuses, as well as asking the folks at the system level and the legislature to look at the administrative requirements and reporting requirements and remove some of those burdens. So that recommendation has been changed to instead say encourage categorical program streamlining and cooperation. Recommendation 8.2, invest in a new student support initiative. So in our prior version, we had consolidated all of these categorical programs, and we had called the biggest lump, which were all of the student support programs, we called that the Student Support Initiative. And then in recommendation 8.2, we said we think that this initiative should be really one of our highest priorities for the funding, for any new monies that come to the community college system. So 8.2, recommendation 8.2 has also been amended because once you don't have that block of programs anymore, you sort of have to figure that out. And looking back through our recommendations throughout chapters 1 through 5 in particular, what we realized is that most of those are falling under the auspices of our current matriculation program. So in this recommendation, we are suggesting, and this is when the task force needs to take a look at again this coming week, we are suggesting that we sort of rename and rebrand, for lack of a better term, our matriculation program and give it a very high call for the allocation of new monies when state dollars reemerge to this system. Recommendation 8.3 was originally entitled an alternative funding model for basic skills and has since been revamped with a new title and a slightly different twist. So under the new recommendation, what we heard broadly was that districts wanted the ability to develop pilot programs and to experiment, and I'm sorry, Member Perez isn't here for this, I think she'd appreciate this recommendation, experiment with new modes of basic skills delivery using apportionment dollars. What we heard was that it was very difficult for colleges to be able to pilot those programs and gear them up because their resources ended up being so constrained. Either you had apportionment monies that were divvied out based on sort of this third week census date, or you had categorical program dollars. So this recommendation was altered to rather than suggesting changing of statute and a whole host of other very complicated matters, we do think that there's still some minor budget and statutory changes, but to allow districts to submit proposals to the chancellor's office to essentially use some apportionment money to pilot new programs in basic skills. Chapter 9 is a new chapter. We used to have this as recommendation 8.4 under Chapter 8. In the old version, it said, do not implement performance-based or outcome-based funding at this time. And the task force argued back and forth every single meeting about how could you have a recommendation that was a recommendation not to do something. And so we wanted to remedy that problem and get people to stop talking about that particular thing, and instead structured a new chapter that tries to synopsize our conversation about outcomes-based funding. If you're looking for the conclusion of that conversation, the conclusion the group came to was, at this time, they felt that the data that they had received from other programs, other outcome-based programs nationally, was still very new, that the results were mixed at best, generally that the results were very young, and that it was a bit of an experiment that they were not willing to impose on California. So the answer was do not implement outcome-based funding at this time. We felt that that was important to have somewhere in this report because clearly that was the driver behind Senator Liu's original version of SB 1143, our implementing legislation. So we're hoping that this addresses that issue for her. So that wraps up our 22, roughly, recommendations. I am here. Clearly, Dr. McDougall is here. We've got members of the task force in the audience. We're happy to participate in the conversation with you in any way that you would find helpful.
Chancellor Scott would like to say something, followed by Member Bylansky.
Well, what I wanted to say is that I wanted to introduce, I'm looking around and I see 4 members of the task force, 3 that are in the audience and 1 more that's here on the stage. And I just wanted to recognize them if they want to say anything. Kevin Feliciano, who is head of the Student Senate and represented the students. Constance Carroll, who, as you know, is the Chancellor of San Diego Community College District and was on the task force. Melinda Nish, who represented the CIOs, the Chief Instructional Officers, and is now, in a few days, I guess, or weeks, to be a CEO at Southwestern College. And then Manuel Baca was on the task force. He is a faculty member on the Board of Governors. So I don't know whether any one of those, and I missed somebody? Who did I miss? Oh, Cynthia. I'm sorry, I didn't see you come in.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and Cynthia Rio Bravo is from this area and was one of our faculty representatives appointed by the Academic Senate. Sorry, Cynthia, I didn't see you. Okay, did one of those 5 want to say something?
Well, I can begin.
Okay.
First of all, I want to say that for me personally, it's been a great experience, and I appreciate the Board of Governors and President Himmelstein appointing me to this. Peter and I have had a good time on it. It's been a good staff development experience, I guess you'd say, among other things. Amy covered things very well in terms of the 22 recommendations, the areas we've been working on. Peter mentioned that, was asked if there was consensus on this document or where exactly was the task force on it. And I think, from my perspective, that it is true that we've had debates, and I think next week we'll have another round of discussions about some of the particulars that maybe need to continue to be addressed. But in terms of the large principles and ideas, I think there is a great deal of interest by all of the members to see that some of these things happen. I think it is important for us to recognize that these are, after all, recommendations, and they're not things that are suddenly going to become either regulations or law, although sometimes it feels that way because there is certainly a direction in terms of the recommendations. But each one of these will have to be taken up and taken up in such a way that they actually work, because it's a general recommendation, so the real magic in getting some improvement to the system is some of the detail, exactly how do you get these things to happen, and then, of course, certainly getting a lot of input from the field in terms of the discussions related to that, but also in the implementation process. But, you know, looking forward to next week. I think we've moved along quite a bit, and, you know, we've dealt with some of the things that both Peter and Amy talked about, and I think those changes have been good changes. And so, and lastly, I just, you know, I particularly want to thank the Chancellor for the leadership in this, because I think the discussion is a good one, and it's one that I think that the system should be engaged in at this time. So, thank you for that.
Member Balansky. Oh, hang on. Let's let Chancellor Carroll. and then we'll-
Thank you very much, and also thank you for the opportunity of serving on the Task Force for Student Success. You know, it's our Chancellor, Jack Scott, brings up often the fact that the California Community Colleges is the largest system of higher education in the nation. It's large, it's complex, and it's massively underfunded. And I think the task force went into its work first bonding as a group, and then basing all of its review on evidence and clear goals for the system. We found early on, you know, lots of critics, and the fact that it's very easy to criticize what we do in this large, complex system. What's not so easy is to come up with constructive suggestions that move us forward in meaningful ways, and I think that's what the task force has been doing, and the report you have reflects a very earnest effort to do exactly that. There are areas in which there is still some disagreement, but as a task force member, I'd have to say there is much more agreement than there is disagreement because of the fact that we all have the common goal of serving our students well. And it's important to underscore that what separates, I believe, the community colleges from other sectors of higher education is that the education of the individual students is absolutely first. Not research, not all kinds of other considerations, but a complete devotion to students, despite underfunding and despite overregulation. So we are hopeful that our recommendations will be received in a constructive manner by you when they come in final form, and by the legislature, because that is the intention of the task force. So thank you for the honor of serving, and we hope to see some good outcomes result from our work.
Thank you. Did we have other members of the task force that wanted to say anything? No? Okay, Member Balansky.
More or less what I'm at this point in time is a question based upon the fact that this group has worked for almost a year on recommendations, so they're not something that's been put together overnight. I've gone out and done the public forums. I had the opportunity to go to the Oakland Forum and listen for almost 2 hours to people's commentary. Conferences have focused on this. There's even groups that are talking about, you know, at a certain point whether they should affirm these recommendations. So, I mean, the sense I'm having is come January, something will be passed by the Board of Governors, and something will come out in terms of a document. My question becomes, what happens with it then? I mean, what's the next steps? Because, I mean, in some sense, I would hope it wouldn't be 72 different districts are out trying to make sense of it and implement it. And
Yeah.
But that's my question. What happens at that point in time?
No, and I'll let the Chancellor respond, but certainly one of the things that was that I was so pleased to see, when you look in the document and you look at the requirements for implementation, and tell me if I'm wrong, Eric or Amy or Peter, but about half of what's in there are within the purview of the Board of Governors, which is terrific. We would have the opportunity in our meetings next year to propose changes and vote on them based on the recommendation. The other matters are things only the legislature and governor can decide on. But assuming, or if this body passes those, and I'll let the chancellor speak to that, I would see that we as a board would be very active engaging both the legislature and the governor in the implementation of the things that we can't do ourselves. But Chancellor, if you want to comment on that.
That's a good summation. Now, some of these are just encouraging best practices.
Right.
So, you know, we will get information out about these best practices. Like, for instance, we're suggesting some innovation and alternative ways to do basic skills. Well, we're not going to send out a directive that says you shall adopt a particular method of basic skills, but we want that discussion to start in local districts. Some would be regulation and some would be statute. And let me give you an illustration. The last 2 years we've done, I think, 3 things that have made a difference. One was Senate Bill 1440, which had to do with transfer. That had to be statute. That couldn't have been done by regulation. Now, the implementation is being carried out now by the Academic Senate of Community Colleges and the Academic Senate of California State University. So the implementation of this common transfer degree is being carried out now and implemented by the Academic Senate. However, the Academic Senate came to us with a recommendation concerning prerequisites. We discussed it at great length, and finally, as a regulation, we adopted the idea that a local college, after it's being thoroughly vetted by the curriculum committee, could adopt prerequisites for certain courses. The next one was repeatability, and once again, that was thoroughly discussed. The idea that a student can only repeat a course for 3 times. So that'll give you an illustration of regulation and statute. And some of these things clearly are matters of statute. And I'm under no illusion that after they're discussed in the legislature, that they'll come out exactly the way that it's recommended here. I mean, you know, as one who spent 12 years in the legislature, I can attest to the fact that a lot of bills start off in a certain way and end up in a different way. But a lot of this is just practices that we're just simply saying, you know, let's begin a discussion on basic skill. Let's start doing some things in terms of making sure that course offerings are aligned to meet student needs and so forth. And as I said before, and I don't mean to be terribly repetitive, but I think some of the best things that's going to happen as a result of this is that it will begin a discussion at the local level, and each campus can say, how can we improve student success at our college? And there will be faculty and counselors and administrators and students who will come up with some great ideas that have a particular reference to that particular campus. And they may not be spelled out in this. So that's more or less what I would say as to how this will happen. But I want to emphasize what our board member here, Baca, said. These are recommendations. And if you think that if any of them are passed by the Board of Governors in January, and on February 1st, they're going to suddenly be, they're going to be the law, you're wrong. This is just simply recommendations. A lot of people have gotten under the illusion that some way or another, in one sense, it's a compliment. It's a compliment to think that it would have that much power. But I've got to tell you that it's not true, that these are what we say they are. They're recommendations. Now, we think they make sense, but if whatever body considers them thinks they don't make sense, then they won't happen.
Okay.
The only other comment I'd make is as we move forward, though, particularly with the things that are practices, that there's somehow to facilitate that beyond districts and colleges, but to have some kind of a more global dialogue about that. because I've noticed in the past in my own district, when you can step out of your district and connect with 3 to 4 other districts doing things, and somehow to facilitate that or recommend that or set that up, that more got accomplished because it was a larger group of people talking to one another and sharing experiences.
Okay, duly noted. Member Baum, Member Ramos, then Member Storm.
First off, my compliments to Member McDougall and Amy Supinger for their leadership of this effort, and it was a good report, and I feel very well briefed on what the recommendations are going to be submitted in January. And my compliments to the members of the committee. Going back to the conversation and what happens next, though, too, Mr. President, how do you envision, though, whatever we pass in January, we know it doesn't go into effect in February, but those items that are within the jurisdiction of the Board of Governors, do you envision us taking them up as a package? Or do we go through our procedure of taking each one up individually with a first reading and a review and then bringing it back?
The Chancellor and I have had, and staff have had discussions about that. I mean, my own personal view is that I would hope we would act quickly, assuming this is passed. I mean, we have the ability, one of the, certainly don't have a lot of power as the chair, but I am authorized to call meetings. And I would put myself, and I think I have to support the Chancellor, to proceed with all deliberate speed. So assuming, and if we would pass this, I would work with the Chancellor and the rest of my members here to establish a schedule and procedure for taking those up. And I can't answer whether we would, we probably wouldn't want to pass everything at the same time or implement things, because we want to give everybody time to discuss, debate, all of those things. But
Because I'm concerned with
Yeah.
something that I think Amy mentioned too, to try to break it up too much and
Yeah.
delay it too much
Yeah.
will have wasted this collective effort that we've pulled together. And I want to make sure we have an outcome and
Yeah.
results
I
this process.
I appreciate, and you certainly have my commitment to move quickly on those, although in a way that we hear all the voices we need to hear. Member Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do share Member Baum's appreciation of the hard work that's obviously been invested in this process and in this important product. What I'm wondering about is the following. I know that, well, let me just frame it by saying this. On the, one of the most important things I look for when significant systematic change is proposed is how do we know it when we see it and when we've achieved it, you know? And I think, as in most things in society, when we do our best work to accomplish tough things, we set goals. President Kennedy said, by the end of the 1960s, we will have a man on the moon, and we were able to achieve that because people got behind that, mobilized it, made it happen, something that seemed impossible in the moment, notwithstanding, you know, the fact that we actually did it. And I just think that even though there are momentum points, there are local and institutional goals that are established here, there's the scorecard, there's the notion of a longitudinal student record system, all of which makes tremendous sense. What I wonder is, what does it sum to? At the end of the day, how will we know as leaders and as a system that we've really moved the dial in a significant way and in a way that really comports with the amount of fiscal investment that we would have to make in realigning and reallocating our resources to achieve the outcomes that we're seeking to achieve? It's a big question that may not have a specific answer now, but my guess is that if we are to move in this direction and we are to propose to the legislators that would have to move law to facilitate this, it would be much more inspiring and much more likely to gain significant results for the amount of investment imposed if it was possible to say that we would like to see a 25% increase in our transfer rate. We would like to see some other metrics involved that are significant, that are exciting, and that would, you know, make a tangible difference in the nature of the service that we provide as a system, the value added to the state economy, and in other areas of import to our mission. And this is the one part of the report that maybe is beyond its scope that I think is important to have an eye to, because I think the component parts by themselves and even hanging together, as impressive as it is, as good as they are, doesn't really necessarily mean anything if we don't have some more significant, broader outline of objective and destination that draws all of our component stakeholders together around a common mission. So I wonder if, Peter, you might want to comment on whether that's a fair and accurate
just briefly,
observation.
I do think, Henry, that it's very clear that this entire effort has been motivated by our desire to see the system be more effective in terms of student outcomes, i.e. student success, whether that be in degrees, completion of basic skills, transfer, et cetera. So I think the work of the task force has created a tremendous sense of expectation, and that there will be follow-through, there will be leadership, and if you will, that this matter of student success will be the focal point on the agenda of this board. I would hope for a minimum of a 2 or 3 year period. My impression from the chancellor is that that the leadership for coordination and support needs to come from the chancellor's office in working with the system, with the tremendous potential that exists throughout the system, bringing that to bear, but bringing it to bear in terms of, to use your word, showing how the needle is moving forward as a result of all those efforts. So the scorecard on the key dimensions that I referred to earlier will be certainly something that I think this board would want to look at every year for the next 2 or 3 years at a minimum.
I would
If
just,
I-
go ahead,
Oh, I
please.
apologize. If I could just add one more thing. You know, when we as staff looked at how to sort of scope out the work, you know, a 12-month process and how to use and spend that time, we very heavily debated whether or not the task force should set some kind of a goal for student completions of, you know, degrees or transfer or certificates. And the conclusion we came to was that nationally there were a lot of numbers, you know, many of which were driven by the Obama administration in its setting of goals for colleges nationally, and we foresaw a circumstance in which the task force could spend its entire time debating those numbers. What's the right number? What's the right percentage for increase? And we knew that the trajectory needed to look like this. And so to target it or to peg it at a specific number felt in some ways like that didn't need to be our focus. We were very concerned about how you get that trajectory pointed a slightly different direction, sloped a different way. So we didn't talk about, you know, the numbers the Community College League chose, or the numbers the Lumina Foundation chose, or the Obama administration, or anyone else's. So in some ways, not setting those goals by this task force was intentional, and we left it to some of these other kinds of processes, like the more local goal setting and the scorecards.
Yeah, and I don't want to suggest that it would be appropriate to impose some top-down goal. I think what might be really interesting is in the process of each district and each institution in our system sort of setting these goals and establishing the mechanics of the measures that you've recommended, that they you know, determine in their own localities and their own realities what makes sense, and we simply take an aggregate of that. And again, it's not to sort of suggest that this should be heavy-handed or that it should be kind of tied to monetary rewards or punishments or anything like this, but I just really believe very firmly that if we just let it sit without having some metrics behind the endpoint over X period of time and with so many dollars, I'm sure some very good things will happen, but I'm not sure that we will stretch ourselves as far and wide as we would need to have something that is really a stretch and yet an achievable stretch that will really take us to a different level in the stratosphere. That's just my humble opinion, but I really think that maybe in consultation with many of the other stakeholder groups that would be involved in seeing this work through, that may be a next phase of conversation so that we have something not only to hold ourselves accountable to, but something to really strive for that can excite us and pretty much everyone involved in this campaign, because I would see this fundamentally as a campaign over the time frame at least that Peter talked about, if not longer. And I just worry again that if we don't have something that we're really shooting for that is an achievable stretch goal on multiple levels, that it will be too easy to fall back perhaps on just the assumption that because a lot of process and a lot of change and movement is happening, that necessarily means that we're actually achieving things that at the back end are different than just going through the motions.
Understood.
Member Storm, followed by Member Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually have an administrative question about the vote procedure that we'll take in January. Will we consider the recommendations as a package, or will we be looking at them individually, one by one?
I think it's our intent to do it one by one.
Thank you, sir.
We do have a meeting, I think it's December 6th, to discuss the agenda, but I think it would be our intent to take it one by one. Member Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have just a question on timeline and procedure. I did attend the Consultation Council meeting at CCLC, and the next steps. Today's draft, and by the way, Amy and Peter, thank you for the excellent presentation today, was delivered to the board members as of 4:30 yesterday.
Right.
Heading into our January meeting, what kind of timeline can the board expect to receive the final document to review it in its entirety? And also, following up on the conversation and consultation, how can we have a final document presented and then take action the same day? Normally, the process says you have an information item and then action at a follow-up meeting.
Chairman McDougall, I'll let you talk about the
I'll be glad to
the
respond, but Eric
document,
wanted to
but
say
Eric,
something
go ahead.
first.
I was just going to say, in terms of the timeline, in terms of the final draft of the document, our work schedule would deliver that to you 10 days before the meeting, according to the public noticing. If we can beat that deadline, we will. But that's a production time frame we've got built in at this point.
And we will be sure to get it to you 10 days before, because that's our legal requirement. But I can tell you that we have gone through a lot of iterations, as you can gather. And I would assume that this document is largely what will occur, unless I'm surprised. There are still 2 or 3 of these items that we will discuss, and there might be some changes. There might be a change in 4 or 5 of the items. But I think most of the items have been thoroughly discussed. We have had a tremendous vetting of this with a lot of groups, and so I would say look first at this document, but then 10 days before, if there are any changes, we'll let you know about that too.
But getting to Member Hawkins' question, which I think I understand, I'm going to ask Vice Chancellor Bruckman to respond. Member Hawkins is saying, and he's right, there is a procedure where you have a first reading, that's an informational thing. Can you explain?
When we make changes to our Title V regulations, there's a requirement for a first reading and a second reading.
Okay.
And in the process for adopting a document like this, there's no requirement that there be a first and second reading. It's entirely up to the board.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question, Member Hawkins? Member Baum, you had a question.
I just had a question. So I was a little puzzled by the thought that we will be taking them up individually. And is that the recommendation of the task force, that we review them and vote on them individually, the recommendations?
Well, let me say something. The reason I say that is, unless, the board could move to do that, but it would seem like there might be, if you said there are 22 recommendations, and let's say recommendation 4, 7, and 9, where there was some discussion desired on the board, you could pull those off. You could do it. In other words, we don't want you to, I'm not trying to, I guess what I'm trying to say is, we don't want any member of the Board of Governors, if they feel that if there's one or two of those recommendations that they couldn't go, that they chose to vote against, I think they ought to have the right to vote against them, and rather than just say this is a package up or down, and that's the only reason I'm saying that. There may be some that you can reach consent on very quickly.
Okay, yeah, so you're arguing for like a consent calendar model.
Well,
No.
You're the board. I'm not, all I want to do is, number one, do what it is that you want done. And I don't want anybody to feel railroaded. I don't want everybody to feel like they had an opportunity to talk it over. And that's what this meeting is about, to allow the board to ask any questions they want to ask. And the procedure, I'm not a member of the board. You can adopt whatever procedure you want. But I just want to make sure that nobody here felt like that they were forced to vote for all 22 when maybe they demurred on, number 9 or something like
Right.
that.
And maybe your consent calendar idea is a good idea, but
I didn't envision it being 22 separate votes on these things too, because I think that would violate some of the spirit of what we've been talking about, of trying to keep
Well,
the package.
Member McDougal.
yeah, I think the assumption on the part of the task force would be, as is noted in the introduction, that these are a set of individual recommendations, but they fit together into a whole. So the assumption would be that it would be the report that would be presented for the approval of the board. However, as the chancellor said, and as would be understood, if any member of the board felt sufficiently strongly about any one item, that item would be open for discussion, and, there could be a request that that item be tabled or whatever. But it would be presented as a whole. It would seek the support of the full board as a full report, but it is recognized that if for whatever reason something jumps out and is seen as for not being appropriate, that there would be that capability of deleting it.
Well, I would just say.
Or modifying.
I wouldn't object to any board member pulling one for separate discussion. But
Yeah.
my hope is that we can maintain the spirit of the process of adopting a package.
Member Baca, followed by Member Malumed.
Well, just to follow through with what would happen if we ended up with a need to discuss it further. I suspect that we'd be in a position to call a special meeting at some point in the future if they're needed after discussion, another look at the recommendation. It seems to me that it would become a little bit more than problematic if the board began to change the recommendation in one way or another, which would make it not a recommendation from the task force, but a recommendation that's from a different source. So I think it's probably important to try to avoid that. But it seems to me that, and Vice Chancellor Ruckman maybe can fill us in on this, as to having an additional meeting, because we do have a requirement to report to the legislature. But I would suspect that we'd be able to follow up with a subsequent meeting, which would maybe further discuss if it came to that. That's more of a question than a recommendation.
Yes, certainly. Or
This
want to
point.
have an additional meeting, you can call an additional meeting.
Member Malumed.
I agree with Member Baum. I like the way he thought about presenting it to the board. And I was just going to remind everybody, in theory, we're accepting a report at our board meeting, and then after we're done accepting it, we're sending it to the legislature March 1st. So that's one thing we're doing. But the other thing we can be doing is also talking about how are we going to implement it, and that can be a multi-meeting discussion. So, we have a deadline, and we have to get that job done, and we have to give the task force time to do their final beautiful report.
Right.
But we also have our working thoughts about this and what we want to do.
Right. And I do, as the Chancellor and I have discussed, and I alluded to earlier, I do envision calling additional meetings next year regarding the implementation interpretation. So what I hear from the board in general here, in that my meeting with the chancellor next week when we establish the agenda, the board would like to see this presented as a package with the option of individual board members being able to pull for discussion certain recommendations. Am I correct in that? Okay, very good. Other board member comments or questions for Mr. McDougall or Ms. Supinger? Peter and Amy, thank you very much. You did a terrific, terrific job. Thank you to all of the members of the task force as well. Now, I would like to give the public an opportunity to weigh in. I'm going to ask, since I lost my vice president, I'm going to ask Executive Vice Chancellor Bruckman to come up here and give me a hand and call folks to the table. We have a very large number of speakers. I would like to honor your effort and time in getting here. At the same time, I'd like you to adhere to our 3-minute rule. I would like to deviate a little bit from what we usually do, since this is such an important topic. And if individual board members have a response or a question to a particular speaker without us endangering our time limit too much, I'd like to honor that as well. Just seek recognition from the chair, and we can engage a bit with our speakers. We have about an hour and 15 minutes, and we certainly have that many speakers. So, Vice Chancellor.
You want me to call them?
Please, go ahead.
First, we have a group of 4 who will speak together. They have agreed. This is the 4 from the San Diego district. Daphne Figueroa, David Fierro, Ingrid Greenberg, and I've got Daphne Figueroa. Is there a 4th person?
Madeline Higgis.
Okay, so you will have a combination of 12 minutes altogether.
Right here. Tiff.
Peter, welcome back.
Left or right? Hey, good afternoon. Chancellor Scott, Board of Governors. For the record, my name is David Fierro. I'm Academic Senate President and Associate Professor of Engineering, San Diego City College, San Diego Community College District. With me are my Senate colleagues, Madeline Hinkes, San Diego Mesa College, Daphne Figueroa, San Diego Miramar College, Ingrid Greenberg, San Diego Continuing Education. I apologize. So, Board of Governors, as you know, the original master plan of the California Community Colleges was adopted in 1960. At its foundation, that the California Community Colleges were to admit any student capable of benefiting from instruction, with its primary mission of providing academic and vocational instruction for older and younger students through the first 2 years of undergraduate education. Simplicity and wisdom of the original master plan was, and still is, very powerful, and provides an avenue for countless Californians who are in pursuit of higher education. I'll get back to this shortly. The intent of Senate Bill 1143, among other things, was to require the Student Success Task Force and the Board of Governors to hear input on the task force recommendations from community college and other stakeholders, and then to report its findings to the Senate Education Committee and to the Assembly Higher Education Committee. We understand that business stakeholders sometimes have alternative motivation and ideas for student success. However, the voice of students must not be overshadowed by these stakeholders. The district that I am a part of, San Diego Community College, did in fact endorse this bill. Speaking on behalf of the academic senates for the San Diego Community College District, City of Mesa, Miramar, and Continuing Education, I'd like to implore the board to take serious consideration on input to the recommendation as they affect the original mission of the California Community Colleges. Please do not weaken the mission, but rather strengthen it. The board should especially note the possible unintended consequences that may negatively affect student access to the community college when crafting the final recommendations that will be forwarded to the aforementioned committees of the Assembly and to the Senate. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Madeline Hinkes. I'm a professor of anthropology at Mesa College and president of the Academic Senate. And I just would like to say a few words about maintaining an element of local control in these recommendations. Each of our districts has a very different student body. The opening pages of the task force report talk about a woman who effortlessly works her way through the system, and a lot of our students aren't able to do that. And each of the students has a different personal measure of success. So if all you're counting is transfer or degrees or certificates, you've left out a lot of the reasons why students come to community college in the first place. Our goal is to produce educated citizens as opposed to cranking out as many certificates as we can, because we think educated citizens are the key to a strong California.
Hello and good afternoon. My name is Ingrid Greenberg. I'm president of the Academic Senate for San Diego Continuing Education. I'm also an associate professor of English as a second language. And I want to thank our Student Success Task Force members, including our Chancellor, Constance Carroll, for their leadership, for their time, and their commitment to student success. I would also like to express our appreciation to the task force members who have conducted town hall meetings, and you've listened to much feedback, both online and in print. And we very much appreciate changes that support student success. Notably, the task force members have deleted the recommendation 4.1 bullet 6, and we thank you for that. We also welcome the changes that continue to promote our non-credit students in their academic achievement, career preparation, economic productivity, self-sufficiency, and civic participation, because these are very important goals for all of our non-credit learners. I'm going to tell you a little bit about San Diego Continuing Education because it is an unusual institution within the community college system. San Diego Continuing Education has been making history for 97 years. We are one of the oldest and largest non-credit institutions, and we serve more than 50,000 learners annually here in San Diego Continuing Education. In San Diego, the Community College Continuing Education Institution is the first in California to meet standards for independent accreditation from the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, and we recently received our reaccreditation status. We're very proud of that. So in the spirit of student success, I'll outline a few profiles of our successful students in San Diego Continuing Education. Business owners. We have restaurant owners who come to our computer labs to improve their computer skills for better bookkeeping and marketing skills in this era of social media so they can compete in this economy. We have welders and shipbuilders who graduate and receive certificates here in San Diego that build our commercial and naval ships that serve military men and women overseas. Students attend computer and internet classes such as Cisco networking, and these students go on to facilitate the software and networks in corporations and small businesses. Many of our students attend English as a second language classes, adult basic education, and GED courses, and they move up the career ladder with this instruction. For example, one of my students, he went through my advanced ESL class. He started as a janitor. He was promoted to a banquet server and now serves as a manager in a major hotel here in San Diego. So our faculty and staff from San Diego non-credit, we look forward to a conversation on non-credit issues, as I've heard mentioned here on this panel. We look forward to contributing to shaping the future of non-credit education in California, and I thank you for your time.
I'd like to thank my fellow Academic Senate presidents from the San Diego Community College District. I'm Daphne Figueroa. I'm Academic Senate President at Miramar College, our furthest college north in the district. And we all serve together on the District Governance Council with Chancellor Carroll, and I'd like to thank Chancellor Carroll for her remarks and for her participation in the Student Success Task Force and for keeping us all informed on a regular basis, and to Cynthia Rico Bravo, our colleague who I had the pleasure to serve with last year as an Academic Senate President, and for her diligence in also reporting back to the faculty on what's going on with the task force and involving us all in the whole process of collegial consultation. I would encourage all of the board members, Chancellor Scott, and any members of the task force who are involved in this endeavor to consider, please, respecting and considering to keep all of the faculty involved from the State Academic Senate, the bargaining agents, and all the different groups of faculty, respecting the different roles that each has, respecting the primacy of the Academic Senate in the collegial manner that you have in the past, and to continue to do that. That is really important. We understand that consultation has been working. It's been working well, and we really appreciate that. We want it to continue, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be able to be here to address the board and to just make our presence felt. And I was reading through the IdeaScale website and some of the comments. I would really like to draw your attention to comments by Dr. Lauren Steck from Monterey Peninsula, one of the trustees there. She posted some excellent comments. I know they're a tiny bit out of date now because they were based on the previous draft, but still many of her positions, I think, were and her points were very, very well taken. I was extremely impressed in what a thoughtful discourse that she did and addressed each of the recommendations. And as a faculty member, I was a little surprised to be so in agreement with the trustee, but I really was. There were only a tiny amount of things I disagreed with, and especially looking at who our students really are. I would encourage any Board of Governor member, obviously the faculty and the students already do this, but any of you, our chancellor, legislators that are involved in making these decisions, and members of the task force, to spend a month or two on a community college campus. Follow us around, follow students around, shadow us, see what we really do, because it's a little different, I think, than what some people have in mind. We serve students, and we really do it in a wonderful way, and as has been pointed out already, we're short on resources, but we're not short on great ideas. So give us a chance. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bob Shireman is next.
Thank you very much. My name is Bob Shireman. I am the director of a group called California Competes that's focusing on, it's a nonprofit organization focusing on future of higher education in California and the connection to the California economy. Just a little bit about my background. I served in the Clinton administration and then more recently in the Obama administration as a Deputy Undersecretary of Education, focused on getting those Pell Grants out there to all of community college students and all over the country. Worked with Martha Cantor on the Community College Initiative nationally. Worked on the issue of for-profit colleges growing very quickly and questions about their how good a job that they were doing serving students. So it is with that background and my work on student loans, really as an advocate for students and student access and success that I come to you today. The California Community Colleges are a lot like this room right now, packed with students at capacity, above capacity. And what that means is that that we actually have a two-tier fee system in California. Because what I want you to really be thinking about as you carry forward these recommendations is not just the students that are in the colleges, but the students who cannot get into the college. Hundreds of thousands of students that can't get into the college. I just heard about a district that, because of the recent budget cuts, cut their nursing program in half. So you've got a huge state need for nurses. You've got a program that was providing that, yet cutting the nursing program in half. And so to say that the community colleges should be about whatever a student's goals are means that when I took Italian and art history because I was going to be going to Italy, and when my friend who takes ceramics over and over again because she has access to the kilns, to say that that should be a priority that comes ahead of those nursing students, the people who want to be nurses, is, you have to do something about that. And the costs, that two-tier fee system that I'm talking about, the students who are not able to get in, some of them give up. They decide, I guess I'm not going to be able to go to college. A lot of them, thousands of them, are finding other options. Sometimes that's okay, but just to give you a sense, I looked at some of the opportunities for someone who maybe was interested in nursing at other colleges in this area. There's $11,000 at National University, $51,000 to become a nurse at one of the other, at a for-profit college nearby. So they are paying huge fees. Many of them are not completing, ending with debt. And so when we think about the student success work that you are doing as figuring out ways to get more of the students who are in this room, if this is a community college, to complete so that they move on and those students can come into the room. So think of your student success work to be about providing access by getting people through the system, providing them better guidance. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Donna Burns.
Good afternoon. I'm Donna Burns. I'm the Dean of Continuing Ed at Mount San Antonio College, but I'm here to present feedback from the Association of Community and Continuing Educators. We represent 62 districts statewide with non-credit programs. And you have a copy of the feedback we're submitting to the Student Success Task Force. It falls into 6 themes, and I'd like to focus just on 3 of them in the interest of time. First of all, we want to thank the task force for their enormous effort and for soliciting and responding to the feedback so far. We talk about broadening the definition of success. San Diego talked a little bit about that. There are many examples of critical areas of student success beyond just degree and transfer, which of course we also support. One example would be parent education completers who, if they complete as part of their court-ordered mandate, they can regain custody of their children. This matters to people in California. Another theme is we have a caution against too many barriers for re-entry to students, particularly those who need very short-term training, such as the business owner who needs 1 class in skills and doesn't need to be assessed for math. He needs that class in and out. The third is educating adults in community colleges. With the near elimination of K-12 adult education in recent years, the state needs to address the need to provide pre-collegiate post-secondary instruction to California's adult population. We believe the task force draft should include a recommendation that the responsibility and funding for adult ed should be assigned to California Community College non-credit programs, and it should be made on principle, as other recommendations are being made on principle, even though funding would need to be required in order to do it. We support local control. That's another theme. Another one, the fifth one is equalization of funding. Recommendations for student success should acknowledge and affirm promises that are already in place. When SB 361 was enacted, establishing non-credit CDCP courses at an enhanced rate of apportionment, there was an agreement to equalize the apportionment rate to that of the credit rate less tuition, so that activities leading to student success in CDCP programs could be supported. We believe this agreement has not yet been achieved and should continue to be affirmed in its intent. And finally, we affirm extension of timeline for feedback and really encourage thoughtful timelines in order to gain all the feedback and discussion needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chancellor Scott.
As the author of SB 361, I have no knowledge of any agreement that said non-credit funding would equal to credit funding.
Less tuition?
I don't know what you mean, less tuition. All I'm saying is that we did say that some non-credit would receive enhanced funding, but not equal to credit.
Yes.
And there was no suggestion that all non-credit funding would be increased. So I don't know where that idea came in, but as the author of the bill, I can guarantee you that I would have been hesitant to see all non-credit courses, particularly I can give you the names of a lot of non-credit courses like ukulele for adults and grandparenting and yoga and all the rest of it. And my voice has been that those kind of things might ought to be placed at the back of the line. And so I just have to be honest with you and tell you that I don't know where you got the idea, but at least as the author of the bill, I didn't have the idea.
Perhaps it was a misunderstanding. Our understanding is that CDCP courses, the enhanced rate funding, that the intent in SB 361 was that it would be funded at a rate that would represent credit apportionment minus the tuition that gets collected by the state of California.
I'm not saying that somebody didn't have that conversation, but they didn't have the conversation with me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Lynette Nyaga. Nyaga.
Good afternoon. My name is Lynette Nyaga, and of necessity, I have to wear two hats. My first hat is the CCA hat. I'm passing out a letter because Ron...
Excuse me, what does that represent, CCA?
CCA is the Community College Association, which is the affiliate of CTA for the community college. Okay. So some people usually call us CTA, but our real name is CCA. Okay. The letter that's going around, you have two pieces going around. One is a letter from Dean Vogel, who is the president of CTA. It was written to Chancellor Scott, and it raises some issues in connection with the Student Success Task Force that we would ask that you please consider. Second is, my second hat is myself as a faculty member, and my area of specialization is linguistics and ESL. So today I would like to address one issue from the Student Success Task Force report, and that is defining success for students whose goals do not include transfer or a certificate. I'll be drawing from my 27 years. It's amazing to think that, but it is 27 years of experience teaching ESL in community colleges. Many of my students, who are not basic students, by the way, these are students who are at the intermediate or above level, about 2 to 3 levels below transfer. They come to college with a goal of improving their English skills rather than necessarily transferring or getting a certificate. Their goals may include opening up job opportunities. They are private business owners. They want to start their own businesses. They want to get a new job. They want to improve their speaking and writing so that ceiling, raises so they can get the next promotion. They want to improve their reading skills for job-related materials like Autotech manuals or bank statements or invoices. And finally, many of them want to just improve the life skills, which allows them to work with their children and work in the community. Recently, when I attended the public meeting at Saddleback, one of the task force members assured the audience that students who intended to take two or three courses would be measured as successes. The students could do this by stating on their educational plan or pathway that completing 2 courses in writing and speaking was their goal, and when they finished these courses, they would be judged successful. Furthermore, on page 10 of the December 1st task force report, the most recent one, the definition of success, which could apply to ESL students with short-term goals, is percentage of students successfully completing courses. However, these positive beginnings are contradicted in the rest of the report, where the focus is not actually on students with short-term goals. On pages 9, 10, and 11 of the report, the task force defines success as attainment of one of two goals, transfer or certificates.
Professor Nyaga, I'm going to have to ask that you have your final comment.
I had to wear 2 hats, so one of my hats took part of my time. Okay. And
thank you.
Thank you.
Peter White.
Good afternoon, President Himmelstein, members of the board, Chancellor Scott. Welcome to San Diego. I'm Peter White, the Vice President of Student Services at San Diego City College, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the state's Chief Student Services Officers, the CSSOs, whose association president I am this year. First and foremost, on behalf of the system CSSOs, our thanks go to Chancellor Scott, Dr. McDougall, and the members of the task force for all the thinking and debating and reflection and further debating and reflection that this process has entailed on behalf of the system and its students. We're confident it will yield benefits. There are a number of task force recommendations that the CSSOs support, either fully or with some questions and reservations, and others, of course, that we do not. I'll mention just one of the ones to which we are opposed, and that is recommendation 3.2's requirement that BOG students, in effect, immediately declare a transfer degree, certificate, or other goal upon entering the college as part of their BOG eligibility. But rather than try to parse 22 or 23 recommendations in just 3 minutes, I want to focus instead on 4 overarching issues that limit CSSO support for even the recommendations we see as having great potential to benefit students. The first is funding. We recognize that the recommendations are built around policy directions and are not intended to identify all the related funding and implementation issues at this time that would eventually turn policy into reality. Nevertheless, calling for major changes, including major work increases at the college level, especially in student services, without identifying realistic additional funding sources leads to understandable doubts as to the extent to which the recommendations can ever really be carried out. By not addressing the 50% law and the limits it places on colleges' abilities to strengthen the student support services identified throughout the task force's report as being necessary for increased student success, the CSSOs are, to put it kindly, skeptical. Technology. CSSOs and student services staff members are very big fans of technologies that help students and help staff themselves work more efficiently. But we're also coldly realistic from years of implementing experience about the extent to which technology will do the many ambitious things outlined in the task force report or will fully serve as many of our students as the report seems to assume. Also, technologies are in many ways as expensive to implement and maintain as some of the staff time and staff costs they're intended to replace or supplement. Technological improvements will not be the big savings generator we often assume they will be. Third is matching requirements with opportunities. The task force report is replete, as it should be, with recommendations that reinforce each other. From a student services perspective, the most important ones are the proposed requirement of all new students being assessed in developing an education plan to which they must adhere closely. Unless that is matched by course offerings, curricular offerings, and support services that make the requirements on students realistic, don't do either one. They've got to go together. If we require students to do something, we have to put up the resources for them to be able to do that. And
Thank
finally,
you.
success in the classroom. We think
Dr. White, I need to ask you to finish.
Yes, I'm going to.
Okay. You need to do it in 10 seconds.
The report doesn't equally balance the need for work outside the classroom. In fact, it's very heavy in that regard, with the work to do more work inside the classroom where success really takes place for students.
Thank you.
Dean Mancina.
Good afternoon. Dean Mancina. I'm a faculty member in the California Community College system. Having taught students how to be successful at Golden West College and Huntington Beach for the past 33 years, I read the task force's recommendations with great interest. I think we should all be having this type of conversation more often. Over the years at Golden West College, I've developed a peer tutoring program including supplemental instruction, started an open computer learning lab, and created 2 student success courses. I think I've learned something about what students need to succeed after having seen students succeed and fail and the continuum between the two during my many years at the college. Further, as a consultant for colleges and universities in the United States and Canada that have created or are in the process of developing comprehensive student success courses, I've gained a greater perspective on the cultural differences of our students compared to those in other states. Finally, as a local faculty union leader in my district, I've seen the challenges of administration, faculty, and staff in addressing student success concerns given the parameters of California laws and the current extended fiscal constraints on public higher education in our state. I've narrowed my input to 5 points. First, in each recommendation where appropriate, requirements regarding collective bargaining should be added. Leaving it out is misleading to the process. Second, the policy statement regarding strengthening support for entering students is good. Those of us who are teaching prior to matriculation funds watched as with those funds, students who were counseled into the appropriate courses succeeded more often. And when those funds dwindled, we returned to more students enrolling in courses they weren't prepared to succeed in, which interferes with the success of all of the students in those classrooms. Real-time quality and quantity contact with a faculty counselor is what's needed. However, colleges are often unwilling to hire more counselors as counseling does not contribute to the numerator of the 50% law calculation the California community college districts have had the bad habit of living on the edge of, both in rough fiscal years as well as in good fiscal years. The recommendation should include increasing the funding specifically to hire more full-time counselors. Third, I like the recommendation that students be encouraged or required to take a student success course. A long-term research study by Professor Ed Stupka of Sacramento City College years ago told us that students who complete a comprehensive student success course get more involved in the college, take more units, get better grades, and are less likely to drop out. Such courses should be required for most entering community college students and offered for college credit. Fourth, there are no recommendations about addressing the issue of full-time versus part-time faculty. At my district, the Coast District, many departments have only 0 or 1 full-time faculty member. Academic freedom for all community college instructors should be a key concept in a document about improving real student success. Full-time faculty have it, but realistically, part-time faculty do not. Part-time faculty need true parity and sufficient job security so they will have the academic freedom that promotes student success. Finally, there is a recommendation of a student success scorecard. A scorecard is an example of us trying to quantify the unquantifiable. The more important question for me would be, how can we increase the public's confidence in what we are doing and get their financial support to continue to do it?
Sir, I need to ask you to
wrap it up in 10
wrap up
seconds?
10
You got
seconds,
it.
please.
I think to a degree we've fallen into the trap of being so busy doing more with less that we haven't taken the time to toot our own horn. There needs to be more information delivered to the public about California community college students, including testimonials from highly successful students who have floundered maybe a bit on the taxpayers' dime before achieving their goals and then contributing to the California economy and tax base. That's not the whole report, but I have a few seconds more, and I have it in writing, so I can pass it to you so you can read it. Thank you for your time.
Jonathan Lightman.
Thank you, President Himmelstein, Chancellor Scott, Chair McNougal, and members. Jonathan Lightman on behalf of the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges. We have already testified previously, as well as supplied written correspondence on the earlier iteration of the task force report, so I'm going to confine my comments to page 70 of the new report. This is recommendation 8.2. And this, I think, goes to the heart of Member Baca's question before, and it is something that deeply concerns us. In terms of the system should set as the first priority for additional state funding the investment in a new student support initiative. Now, from the accompanying correspondence, it suggests that this is a rebranding of matriculation, but we have a process today where our budget lobbying is done through a task force, through consultation council, and ultimately through a cooperative effort. What we're aware of is that we have gaps in our funding in a whole host of areas, not to mention categoricals such as EOPS, DSPS, transfer centers, part-time equity, part-time health benefits, part-time office hours, full-time faculty conversion, career technical education, and non-credit. Going back to Member Baca's question, the way I read this literally is that when you approve this recommendation, what you have done is you have leapfrogged this over all other aspects of your own budget lobbying. And I will tell you what the practical result will be, which is that we will then be in the budget hearings, each one of us with a different set of priorities. And that was the dynamic that existed about 11 years ago. It wasn't a productive dynamic. And so I would urge caution in this recommendation. In particular, I would urge a rewriting to suggest that this is subject to the normal course of shared governance at the state level, because this maintains faith in the process and it maintains us on the same page as we try to recover from these terrible economic times. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Hendrickson.
Good afternoon. My name is John Hendrickson. I'm the Chancellor at the West Valley Mission Community College District. Student success, it's not a term, it's not a concept, it's our job. And I want to commend this Board of Governors for recognizing that it is student success and its service to our communities, and it's the reason that we're employed and the reason that you're serving in the positions that you are. Throughout the state and throughout the nation, we are all focusing on success in higher education, but that's most especially true for California community colleges. Our tax revenues for state and all local public services remains tenuous and will remain strained for the foreseeable future. Assuring that precious tax dollars are spent effectively to achieve individual student objectives and to spur the state economy through the transfer and career training functions that we most assuredly provide has to be our shared leadership objectives. The Student Success Task Force is the most focused and most complete examination of this issue available. I support the overall task force report, and I urge your board to also publicly endorse the report and to support legislation and regulatory actions that would implement report conclusions. I have served 8 years in general county government service. I have served 16 years in the K-12 arena. Lastly, as a deputy county superintendent of schools responsible for curriculum, business, and media services throughout Contra Costa County, and 18 years in community colleges. Presently as chancellor, I'm also currently president of the CEO board statewide. Also, for the past 2 years, I was pleased to serve on the Community College League of California Commission on the Future. That commission focused on national and regional studies on student success, holding over a dozen meetings, published its findings and recommendations in the fall of 2010, and it's not at all surprising that nearly all of the Student Success Task Force recommendations can also be found in the report of the League Commission. It's my belief, most especially serving through the Commission and watching the work take place at the task force, that it is the united sense of community college trustees, instructional staff, student support staff, and students that the future of our state and nation is predicated on a community college system funded and organized for 3 basic objectives: to maximize the ability of students to complete a post-secondary education, to promote equity in terms of access and success for all students throughout California, and to assure closure of the achievement gap, and thirdly, to ensure that California continues to lead the nation in participation among adults. Key recommendations from the SB 1143 Student Task Force that I find highly effective in serving our students and conserving financial resources include increased collaboration with K-12 educators, developing common core standards, changing enrollment priorities to reflect the core mission of our colleges, as I indicated, requiring students showing lack of college readiness to participate in student support resources to align our course offerings and schedules with the needs of students, get them in, get them going, get them moving, requiring students to participate in diagnostic assessment, orientation, and development of their educational plan, and lastly, requiring students that do have basic skills deficiencies to meet those deficiencies during their first year in college rather than waiting to address those needs. I want to thank you for this opportunity to share my views as CEO of one of the state's very best, the West Valley Mission Community College District. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Eduardo Jesus Arizmendi Pardi.
Good afternoon. My name is Eduardo Jesus Arizmendi Pardi, and I'm talking to you as a faculty member in the community college system. I'm also the treasurer for the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges, and I teach at Orange Coast College, and my subject area is mathematics. I am very concerned about the references to the for-profit anti-labor models, such as those that emulate the Apollo Group, which is basically the Walmart of higher education. Low wages, always, every day, guaranteed. The Apollo Group has been investigated by the federal government for unethical recruiting practices of the homeless and the working poor, as evidenced in the expose by Dateline within the last year or so. There's literally no academic freedom at the Apollo Group, yet academic freedom is the hallmark of American higher education. And as defined by former Secretary General Kofi Annan in 2005 at the Congress of University and Scholar Leaders at, I believe it was Columbia University, he defined academic freedom as the freedom to teach, to speak, to conduct research, to write, subject to the standards of scholarly inquiry, wherever the search for the truth may lead, without intrusion, intimidation, prejudice, penalty, and retaliation. I am very concerned about any reference to the for-profit anti-labor model in that document. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Kimberly McIntyre.
I'm Kimberly McIntyre, adjunct faculty with San Diego Continuing Education. We have listened to you malign the older adult program today. We do not have ukulele classes. We are proud of our older adult students who have now in the job force because they have skills that they learned in our classes, and our classes are age-specific for those skills. It appears that you have a prior agenda regarding some older, or not older adult, that's one of the non-credit classes. Could you share with us some insight on DPS, parent ed, older adult programs, and where they fit into the future of the community college system?
Are you addressing me?
Any of them?
Yeah, okay, I'll tell you, I think non-credit plays a very important role in community colleges. I was president at Pasadena City College, and 9% of our program was non-credit and remains to this day. I think non-credit programs like ESL for immigrants, vocational non-credit like commercial sewing, all of those are wonderful courses. We are concerned not that the classes for older adults, and when I read I can give you, I've got a list, I'm not talking about San Diego, I'm just talking about in general. There are some classes out there that I think ought to be going into what I would call community service. And I'm talking about courses like grandparenting and all that. Now those are, I'm not making these titles up. They're in our curriculum today. So I think non-credit is a great part of our status. I do think that there are some programs that ought to become part of our community service and ought not, as one of our persons adequately said, merely the fact that somebody wants to take Italian because they're going to Italy, that person ought not to crowd out these people who are first-year students. That's all we're saying is that we ought to have a prioritization. And if it's for vocational purposes, then we're 100% behind that. Or if it's for, acquired brain syndrome and things of that nature, I mean, but we have some question marks about allowing courses that are simply taken for enrichment. And I'm talking about somebody who's taken golf now for 6 semesters and something like that. I don't think that's quite as important as our transfer students and our non-credit students who are there for reasons of learning the English language. And I guess I have to also correct something else. We're not saying that people who have only an idea for 2 or 3 courses is not to be counted. Right now, though, we have people, right now our statistics say that of those who complete 12 units, and give her time, don't let my time take away. Those who complete 12 units and state as their purpose as transfer certificate, right now only 52% of those students make it to that goal. So we're not talking about counting people in the situation who only come for a computer course in order to improve their vocational thing. We're actually saying those who have completed 12 units and say that's their goal, but don't make it to their goal. So I hope I'm just trying to clear up some miscommunication out there, some misunderstanding. Maybe we have failed to really communicate as clearly as we should what we're talking about here. We're not trying to attack non-credit. In fact, somebody said earlier, if the state would give us money, I think we ought to do the non-credit. And I guess I take issue. I think that community colleges do non-credit better than K through 12 does. But I don't. I have said to the legislature bluntly that don't call on us to do it and don't give us the money. That we can't do. I mean, that's, we can't do everything we're supposed to do right now. So I just want you to understand that in all my conversations that I've heard in the task force, there was never any degradation or anything said that's bad about non-credit.
So
some of the things you're talking about, we call that community ed, where you pay as you go, as opposed to the free classes. The problem with that is older adults and young parents who want to take parenting classes, some of them are in a social economic situation where they can't afford to pay for those classes.
Well, okay, we just a couple minutes here, okay? Go ahead, Peter.
No, I was just going to say, I think when we look at our students enrolling in the credit class, thousands, if not tens of thousands, cannot pay for those. And I would just like to offer the point of view that as a senior, an older adult, I think it is absolutely terrible that the advantages that our generation had in going through a system that was, in California, was virtually free, and the students of this generation going through have tremendous challenge to try to meet that expense. And so I don't feel a lot of sympathy for not supporting the students who are enrolling right now and attempting to get through the programs. And I think that's where the priority should be.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sherry Padilla.
Good afternoon. My name is Sherry Padilla. I'm the Director of Financial Aid at Antelope Valley College. I'm also the 2011 President of the California Community College Student Financial Aid Administrators Association. Today I'm speaking to you on behalf of CISFA, representing over 500 financial aid professionals. We're excited about the recommendations of the Student Success Task Force, and we support them. We do, however, have concerns in two areas. First, in regard to the recommendation to consolidate select categorical programs, we appreciate the task force's recent decision to delay the recommendation for the time being, as it would have been catastrophic to some colleges' categorical programs in light of the economic climate. We do have ongoing concerns that when this issue resurfaces, consolidation of student financial aid funding could undermine the success of the students that you're attempting to help the most. We are concerned that students would not be able to receive the financial support they need in a timely manner to be successful due to capacity limitations in already strained financial aid offices. More than 1.1 million students in California community colleges receive over $2.25 billion in aid annually. These funds not only support student success, but have a ripple effect in the economies in local communities. We have already seen delays in aid delivery as a result of recent dramatic increases in the number of aid applicants. These delays would be exacerbated if flexibility resulted in decreased staffing or decreased capacity in financial aid offices. Additionally, there could be significant financial aid compliance liabilities in a complex and highly regulated aid program if campus financial aid offices do not meet the federal requirements for adequate administrative capability, including staffing. So again, thank you for delaying the block grant recommendation, and we would encourage the Chancellor's Office to explore collaborative cooperation between categorical programs without flexing mandates. Second, while we support the need for establishing standards for BOG fee waiver eligibility, we respectfully request that you include financial aid professionals as stakeholders in framing the legislation that would apply academic progress standards, identify educational goals, and administer a unit cap for BOG eligibility. Adequate consultation and thoughtfully coordinated implementation will result in clear standards for students to meet that are consistently applied at all community colleges while encouraging student performance. While seemingly straightforward, due to federal and state regulations that govern aid delivery, there could be unintended consequences of these recommendations that could restrict student access and compromise student success. Do not take an action that would result in less funding for financial aid office capacity, and please include financial aid stakeholders in framing related legislation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert Yoshioka.
Every time I think you're going to call me, I'm ready, and then someone speaks, and I got to rethink what I'm going to say. Hi, my name is Robert Yoshioka, and I represent the California Part-Time Faculty Association. In thinking about what I wanted to ask or to say to you this afternoon, it finally occurred to me that if you happen to be Catholic, there's two kinds of sins, right? The sins of omission and the sins of commission. I think that whomever is responsible for sins of omission are guilty of omitting part-time faculty from this discussion. Okay, we've approached a number of people on a number of occasions at the beginning of this process. We asked if we could participate in this discussion and serve on this panel, and we were told in no uncertain terms that our input was not welcome and that we should just go away. Since I represent 47,000 of us, and there are only 12,000 or so full-time faculty, it seemed a little bit disingenuous to listen to people talk about faculty this and faculty that, and in fact, only 2 speakers in this round of hearings referenced part-time faculty. And in both those instances, we came up on the long end of the stick. You know, you need help. We should do something for part-timers. So I thought, well, maybe if I could address some of the recommendations, and then I saw the 22 recommendations, and decided that that would be an impossibility in the 3 minutes or so that I had, unless I were to engage the chancellor in a question and answer, and then I wouldn't have time taken away from me. But rather than do that and postpone everyone's dinner plans, I thought that what I will say in general is that on every single item of every single recommendation, part-timers, believe me, have a lot to say. And the fact that we're not represented and you don't have the benefit of our input, it's your problem. It's not mine. Unfortunately, we're the ones who are in the trenches, providing 47,000 faculty and teaching over half the classes in the system. We're the ones who don't have job security. We have very little office hour protections, and on and on and on. We've been doing this for 40 years. So why would anybody do this? Well, 1/4 of our number leaves every year. And so as a part-time faculty advocate, I spend the majority of my time recruiting new people to keep, and they ask me, why do you do this? And at this point, I don't have a good answer. I sit there and think, well, I've done this for so long, why the hell not? What am I going to do now that I'm retired? But for the new ones who come in, it's scant support to suggest that if you do a good job and you teach your students well, everything's going to work out for you. This is part of the myth. If you work hard, you'll become a real faculty member. Never mind that we're as qualified to teach, and in some cases more qualified to teach, than the ones who have tenure. But that doesn't matter in the real-world functioning of how the system works. So I would hope that the next time a committee like this is convened, a task force like this is convened, to offer up suggestions based on some thoughtful deliberations, that please include part-time faculty. Because if you don't, you're squandering a 47,000 person workforce who have, believe me, tons of input that we can make. And if given the chance,
Professor.
will help the system work better. I'm done.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Dennis Frisch.
Dennis Frisch from the Faculty Association for California Community Colleges, president of that organization. Our board has met a couple of times to discuss the previous iterations of this report. Since it came out yesterday, obviously our board hasn't had a chance to digest this. In those discussions, they recognized both what Member Ramos mentioned as the incredible significance of what is being attempted here, and they offered in a 4 or 5 page letter to the board and to the task force some of their concerns as well as the positive things they saw there. One of the things they mentioned, which I'd like to highlight this afternoon, and which I think the previous speaker and several other speakers have highlighted, is the need for time. I think this board and the task force would like to have the most positive kind of buy-in from the field, the faculty, the staff, the administrators and such, the trustees. In order to do that, time is needed for you to hear the kinds of things you've heard today. The FAC board would urge you, I think, to use as much of this time to gather these kinds of comments and concerns, and you have that time. At the last Consultation Council meeting, a couple of us asked Executive Vice Chancellor Skinner, when is the board's report to the legislature due? And I believe he responded on or by March 25th. First, okay. So there is still time for this board to gather more information from the field and in the process, I think, assure the field that they're being heard and that you're promoting the most positive kind of response from the field to the report and to efforts to implement. As it is now, I think the sense I get from some of the meetings I've attended is that so far what is happening at many of the public forums and the conferences in that is not so much a positive embracing of the recommendations, but concern, anxiety, fear, uncertainty. And we certainly don't need that if we want to achieve the kind of success that this task force is hoping we can achieve. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Audrey Dow.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Audrey Dow, and I'm the Community Affairs Director for the Campaign for College Opportunity. We're a statewide coalition of social justice, business, and community organizations that are committed to ensuring students in California have access and success in our public colleges and universities. I know that you all know the numbers. California needs 1 million more college graduates by the year 2025 to keep our economy productive, on its feet. And we know that community colleges are the vehicle to get us there. 70% of all of our college students in the state are at a community college, and it's really the institution of choice when we talk about students of color, students who look like me and students who look like many of you. For Black men and for Latino men, over 80% of them who go on to college are at this precious, precious institution. Dare I say today that the students who are in community colleges are there with a goal. They're there to get something. They're there to get an associate's degree, to transfer or get a certificate, to be competitive in a workforce and to make their families upwardly mobile. They have goals. And we're not serving them. We issued a report last year, Divided We Fail, which we know shed some light that wasn't so friendly on the system. But it was a call to action when we learned that of degree seekers, only 1 in 3 students were completing after 6 years. We said that's unacceptable. When we heard that 1 in 2, or 2 in 10 rather, students of color weren't being successful, that was concerning. So we were really pleased when the Student Success Task Force was convened and took some bold and ambitious steps to start closing this success gap. We issued a statement in support of the recommendations because we think that they're taking us in the right direction. They really are the best promise for statewide reform. They're scalable, and they're really, again, the best promise in the last decade. Of particularly importance, we really think that the recommendations are starting students off right. The recommendations around assessment, around orientation, around the student success course are going to take our students in the right direction. Putting students' needs first with education plans and the realignment of the coursework, those are key. And the transparency elements with regards to the scorecard, those are the things that we need to see with an eye towards equity, monitoring at every step the achievement gap and the closing of that. We know that our community colleges have sustained substantial budget cuts, but to say we can't do any better without new funding is really unconscionable. This is really an opportunity to blast the status quo. Our students need your boldness. California needs your boldness. So we hope that you consider the recommendations very carefully, and we urge your support. And however we can be helpful in that, we're happy to be a partner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jim Weir.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jim Weir, and I've been teaching career technical education in the California Community College system for 45 years. And according to your student success criteria, I've been doing all this as a failure. A failure because I used Grossmont Community College, 30 miles east of where we're sitting right here, as a vehicle to regain entry to San Diego State University, where I had been truly a failure in my freshman and sophomore years, majoring in beer and girls for 2 years. No certificate or degree or academic transfer from Grossmont is a community college documented failure by the standards in the student success proposal. 2 years later, and 2 years on the dean's list at San Diego State, I graduated with degrees in physics, mathematics, and aerospace science. This failure was then employed by Teledyne Ryan Aeronautical up on Kearney Mesa to help design the landing radar for the Apollo moon landing program and for the Viking Mars soft lander. Auto mechanics come to us for a semester or two of recurrent training after putting in a full day at their repair shop. If it were not for these failed students, 90% of you would not be here today unless you wanted to walk. The other 10% of you would not be here were it not for the airplane mechanics that come to us for recurrent training on the high bypass jet engines and the electronic gizmos that make flight possible. Failures? I think not. When you go home tonight, you had best hope that the cops who keep your homes and loved ones safe took that one class a semester that teaches them the latest in public safety. But then again, they're failures. Heaven forbid you should get sick and need a nurse. Failures who come back annually for their recurrent training. Open the fridge, take out a cool one. Odds are overwhelming that one of my student failures both programs and maintains the robots at the bottling plant where that can or bottle was filled, or the machines that are used to mix up the Sugar Pop or other adult beverages in the can. Thinking about skiing this winter? You had best pray that one of my failures is maintaining the computer-controlled ski lifts that take you to the top of the hill. Or maybe you'd like to visit one of the casinos where my failures keep the slot machines running 24/7. But then again, you never get to the ski resorts or the casinos with that broken car sitting in your driveway, would you? Add to these failures that I have taught who programmed and operated the robots that finally capped that Gusher oil well in the Gulf, the failures that maintain those mechanical marvels that the Las Vegas shows are predicated on, maintain and repair the elevators that you use coming into this building today, and maintain the 1,001 electromechanical devices that we depend on for daily living. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jim Weir, and by your student success standards, I am a failure. Extemporaneously, Mr. Ramos, you referred to Mr. Kennedy in 1961, saying we're going to send man to the moon in 10 years. That was the easy part. We could have done that in 2 years. The rest of that sentence is what I built my life's work on. And we will bring him back safely. And that took us another 8 years to do that. But you know something? We beat Mr. Kennedy's limit by 5 months.
Thank you. Thank you.
1969.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our public comment. Thanks to everybody for your comments and for taking the time to be with us today. Board members, unless there are any further comments, we are going to adjourn and attend our event tonight. Any comments or questions from the board?
Appreciate the testimony very much.
Very good. Very good. Last thing, I want to welcome our new members. We all look forward to serving with you. I think we have an event that starts at 6 for our veterans.
Can you tell us where it is?
No, I can't, actually. but Linda might be able to.
It's in the Harborside room.
Harborside.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, thank you, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.